and welcome to Sheffield Banjo Lessons, where today we are going to look at intonation and how it relates to the banjo. And what we're going to do is we're going to discover what does intonation actually mean, and then we're going to look at what does that mean for the banjo itself. So let's start with understanding the term intonation. And what it's basically related to is about being in tune, but not just in tune as an instrument could be, but all the notes being in tune as we progress our playing throughout the entire instrument. So it's about a note hitting the pitch it is supposed to hit. So if a pitch is a little bit off, it's a little bit high, we say it's a little bit sharp. And if it's a bit low, we say it's a little bit flat. And if it's either of those, then the intonation's not quite correct for what we're trying to do. So if you have good intonation, it means that the instrument is set up, or maybe you're a singer pitching it and you're hitting the exact right note. So let's carry on with that singer example for a moment then. So if a singer's trying to sing a certain note, but their voice is drifting slightly higher or lower, you can normally hear it. You normally think, oh, they've not quite made that note that they're intending to. And that means that their intonation is slightly off. It means that the note they intended to hit, they've either wavered a little higher or a little bit lower, and therefore not quite met the note. So the note isn't the note they wanted. If conversely, they did hit that, and every time they're singing, they're bang on with the pitch that they're aiming for and the note they're aiming for, we say they have good intonation and they're getting to hit the notes that they are aiming for. On the other side of that, think about a keyboard and an electric piano. All of these keys are digitally sort of set. So therefore, you press a C, you get a C. You press the next C higher up, you get a C. So they are always going to be perfect. So the singer, again, going back to that example, singing against the piano, if they're pitching and they're slightly off, you're going to notice it, aren't you? You're going to think they didn't quite make the note that they were kind of intending to. So they didn't seem quite right. Okay, so then that comes back to intonation and being able to accurately pitch against the desired note. So in short, intonation is how accurately a note matches the correct intended pitch. So is a C a C? Is a D a D? Or is it slightly off? And whether it's a voice or a violin, a guitar or a banjo, intonation and being able to accurately pitch the notes that we want is really important to the instrument sounding good. And that's especially more exposed when you're playing with others when their intonation's correct and yours is slightly off. You might be playing the right thing, but not kind of like meeting the right note. But in short, again, intonation is related to how accurately a note matches the intended correct pitch. So how does this relate to the banjo? Well, just like with singing, the intonation on the banjo is about whether the notes that you're actually playing are the correct pitch. Okay, and that doesn't apply to just tuning your banjo and having it correct as open. That relates to then as we play higher up the neck. Is it still creating the exact same? Is it still playing the right notes pitched correctly as we wish them to be? And you notice that again, the more up the neck that you're playing, that you can be perfectly tuned when it's open, but then actually the notes are drifting and wavering and kind of swimming into one another. So they kind of sound a little bit off, even though you think I'm fretting the right position, I'm not bending the strings to be out. And you're right, this is kind of where it can come in. And so when banjo players talk about good intonation, it's about the instrument being set up that wherever you're playing across the neck, the pitch is correct and therefore it sounds nice and where it's supposed to be. So again, in short, intonation on a banjo is generally related to, does the banjo play in tune all the way up the neck and not just when open? So where does this fit in with the banjo then? Well, where we first start to look is at something that we call scale length. And setting the scale length will give us the correct intonation. So the scale length is basically the distance from the nut to the bridge that the string is travelling with the area that can vibrate. And if it's too long or too short, then the pitch that you're intending is going to be either too flat or too sharp. And we need to change that so that it all then rings correctly. So thinking about when we need to check our intonation, it's generally in a few different ways. So it could be that you're restringing the banjo and therefore all the tensions have changed and you're going to need to sort of just double check it and set it up there. It could be that you've taken the bridge off when you're restringing fully and then you need to place it from scratch. It could be that you have bought an instrument and it's not been set up correctly when it's left at the factory or the shop. Or it could be that it's been sat in a room for ages and the temperatures have gone crazy and then everything's moved around a little bit. Generally, every time you do restring your banjo, if you're looking after it though, do check it because this is something that can shift slightly just depending on the tensions and how you changed your strings. So, how do we know if we have an intonation issue with the banjo? Well, it's relatively straightforward to find out actually. And we're going to need our tuner for this. So we're going to pop the tuner on and then you're going to check the tune of your banjo and make sure it is up to correct pitch. Okay, and then we're going to check two different strings. We're going to check the first string and the fourth string. And the reason why will become clear a little bit later on in the video. And what you're going to do is you're going to play it open, make sure you're happy that it's in tune, and then we're going to play it on the 12th fret, which is the octave up, where you'll see the same note again on your tuner. And what you're looking for on your tuner is how does it behave? So was it in perfect tune when it was open, but now you've fretted it at the 12th fret? Is it showing a tiny bit sort of sharp, a bit high, or a bit low, a little bit flat? Or is it bang on? And then what you're going to do is try and remember that, and then you're going to do the same with your first string. So that was open, and then at the 12th. And you're seeing how it then reads. So, if it's showing as bang on, open, and at the 12th, exactly the same, then your intonation is absolutely fine. It's correct. You can go and play, and wherever you travel across the banjo fretboard, the notes are going to sound like the notes that you want them to be. But if the tuner shows that it's slightly off, even just by a small amount, that's showing that we have an incorrect scale length, and that what we need to do is we need to move our bridge to be able to change this so that we can bring all the notes back into the pitch that we want them to be. So, as banjo bridges are movable, their actual placement's super important to how the banjo behaves. And going back to that scale length idea very quickly, if the bridge is too far up, it creates a sort of a shortening of the scale length, and it's too short, and then the pitch is going to be out. And equally, if it's too far south, it's too far towards the tailpiece, then it's going to create the opposite issue where the scale length's too long and we're not getting the right pitch yet again. So considering that we can now move this, this is the piece that we're going to be pretty happy about sort of controlling how we set the intonation on the banjo. And even tiny and slight motions and movements of this do have quite an effect, which is why it's definitely worth doing every time that you restring your banjo anyway. So where and how do we move the bridge, right? Okay, we said we need to move it. Where and how's the physical motion work? Right, well, let's have a little think about the bridge itself. So have a little look at yours if you've got your banjo with you. You can see it is just pretty much a line, right? It's just a piece of wood in a line. And with that then, we've only got two edges we can move. It's not got multiple sort of feet and points that can be moved around. If your bridge has a middle foot, it's going to move wherever you move either end of the bridge, right? So we've only got 2 points of contact we can even shift it by. That's okay. And let's have a think for one moment when I said we do it by checking the D strings though. What about the outside G then? Because the G is closer to us when we're moving these. Well, we never really fret that G string when we're playing banjo. So therefore, if we've got it tuned up, accurate as it is open, we can generally just be okay with that. But your string 1 and your string 4, you are going to travel and fret quite a far way across the banjo. So therefore, they're the ones that we can kind of control their point and make sure that they're more accurate. So with that in mind, we're going to use the 2 D strings as our sort of accuracy radar to check about where our placement is. And it's going to start with the same sort of process we had before, where you play it open, and then you play it on the 12th, and you're seeing how it behaves. Does it say that it's a little bit sharp or flat? Now, if it does say that it's a little bit sharp, what we're going to need to do is increase that scale length. By that, we're going to have to move the bridge closer towards the tailpiece, right? And if it's the other way around, if it's a little bit flat, we need to shorten the scale length. And what that means is we're going to move the bridge a little bit higher towards the neck. And we're normally talking just small fractions here. It doesn't need giant motions. So when you're doing this, ideally what you want to have is a nice flat surface with maybe some a mat on it, so that you're not going to scuff up your banjo and that you're not going to scuff up the surface that you're doing this on. I'm just going to do this in my lap whilst we are right here. So wish me well. And what I'm going to do then is let's pop this back on, give it a final check. Mine is showing almost bang on. There's just a tiny fraction that is high, so I'm going to need to lengthen it. Right, but I'm going to check string 1 now and see if it's going to be both sides. Again, absolute sort of tiny difference mine's going to make. So what I'm going to do then to move this is I'm going to put my fingers on both sides of it. I'm going to hold it firm, and it's under a lot of tension, so this is going to feel a little bit weird to do at first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it and I'm just going to shimmy it just like that, just that tiny bit back, a bit closer towards the tailpiece. I'm then going to bring the strings back up to tune and check how they read now. And they're actually reading completely bang on. So this one hasn't drifted much whatsoever. Okay, so that's a good thing. Sometimes you'll need to repeat the process though, especially when you've done a restring, and you'll just make sure that when you're moving the bridge, the feet aren't lifting as well and giving you a bit of an incorrect reading. If that happens, just release a little bit of tension on the strings. Flatten the feet out so that they're then touching the skin of the banjo head, and then you'll be able to get a better sort of position on it and move it. Okay. Now, what if one of your strings is reading correctly and one's a little bit high? Well, what you're going to have to do there then is only move one side of the bridge. So let's, for instance, say it's string 1 that needs to move, but string 4 is absolutely fine. We're going to hold, well, in that case, we're going to hold the bridge the same way, but at the top, I am going to just hold it in place. And then it's actually just with the bottom side, I would then just move it on an angle slightly, and it wouldn't be flat anymore, it'd just be slightly tilted. And that's absolutely fine. If you think it looks a little bit weird because you think they should always be flat, just start looking at other pickers. If you've not seen them already, you'll suddenly notice that there's loads of banjos where the actual bridge is just on a slight angle, and that's so that they can then set the intonation up correctly. So when you've repeated the process, and you're happy that both string 1 and string 4 are exactly reading as you require them, both open and on the 12th fret, well, congratulations, you have set the intonation on your banjo, and you have done that by correct bridge placement and making sure that the scale length is the right one for your instrument, right? At that point then, all your notes should sound where you want them to be as you progress up the neck. So, a couple of final points here though, right? Some of you will have done this with your banjo and you have realised that the middle string, usually the G, occasionally the B, isn't sitting exactly as you wish if you end up checking the intonation on those. That's okay, that does happen. Banjos are kind of imperfect by their nature, and they're designed to be sort of tinkered with a little bit. And you may have heard the term a compensating bridge. So it could be that something like this is required. What a compensating bridge does is it has different slots, distances for your scale length. So it will be a flat bridge, but maybe the G is set back slightly, so it gives you a slightly longer scale length. But if you're coming across this and you're a bit confused, your best bet is just take it into your local folk music or bluegrass dealership and let them take a look, and they should be able to advise from there for you. But besides that, congratulations, you have set the intonation, you have learned, and you can now empower all your friends to do the same. So with that in mind, I'll see you next time, and happy picking.